Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 163 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. You?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there.
That's good, man.
Things seem to be going a little better for me. I know last week I was a little, what's the word? Antsy. I felt like I wanted to get out and do something.
Yeah, you were getting a little crazy.
Yeah, I still have that feeling, but it's lessened. There was just something about last week where I was really feeling a little hemmed in.
Yeah, and I know your wife told you just go out and get the mail then.
Yeah.
You know, a couple times during the week, and maybe you'll feel better, and I guess you did.
Yep, and that fixed me all up.
Yeah.
But no, I'm doing good. I do think, and I may have already said this, but I do think all of this has been much tougher on my two girls than it's been on me.
Sure.
Just because I'm kind of a homebody anyway.
Yeah.
And my wife's here. But my daughters both have boyfriends.
Yeah.
When they don't get to see their boyfriends, they get cranky.
I know. And FaceTime's just not good enough, you know?
No, it's not enough for them. So we did buy one of those fire pits that you put a propane tank under.
Yeah, I seen it out front.
Yeah. And so, 6 feet apart, put your mask on, the boyfriends come over, they can sit.
Yeah, hang out there.
Yeah, but the problem is they're sitting out there so long, we ran out of propane. So now, and we had to take the propane from the grill.
Right.
So
yeah.
I got to get some more propane.
Which means you're going to have to leave the premises.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Gibbs, our support on Patreon continues to blow us away.
It does.
I just can't get over it. And for people to make the decision going through what we're all going through to say, hey, we got to help these guys out to keep this podcast going. I'm blown away by it. That's all I can say. So let's give some shout outs.
Let's do it.
We had Maddie Cooper.
Hey, Maddie.
Selena Mobley.
Hey, Selena.
Diana Link.
What's going on, Diana?
Kat Messersmith.
Hey, Messersmith.
J Rum 91.
Hey, pour another rum for me.
Alex S.
Hey, Alex.
Kim Antill.
Hey, Kim.
Felicity.
What's going on, Felicity?
Cameron H.
Hey, Cameron.
Nina Massing.
Hey, Massing.
Jamie Hunt.
What's going on, Jamie?
Chip Mathis.
Hey, Chip.
Laura Galloway.
Hey, thanks, Laura.
Philippa Kelly.
Philippa.
Lisa Williams.
Hey, Lisa.
Lindsay Luhu.
Hey, you Luhu, you.
Beth Willette.
Hey, was that Oulet?
Okay, I'm going Willette.
Oulet?
But you go with whatever you want. Melinda Hattinger.
Hey, Melinda.
And I know, strangely, you'll be closer than I am. Nicole Ortiz.
Hey, Nicole.
Britton Rice.
What's happened, Britton?
Crystal Hughes Robbins.
Hey, Crystal.
Brianna Barkley.
What's going on, Brianna?
Sun Contreras.
Ooh, Contreras.
Yeah, it's a very cool name.
It is.
And last but not least, Stevie Ray.
What's going on, Stevie Ray? You want to play a little guitar riff?
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
And then we go back into the vault, Gibbs.
All right.
This week we selected Lisa Stober.
Hey, thank you, Lisa.
Been with us a long time. So we appreciate the new Patreon support, the continued Patreon support.
We do.
We had some amazing PayPal donations as well. Geraldine Jensen.
Hey, Geraldine.
Elizabeth Skull.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Kathleen Martin.
Hey, Kathleen.
And Angie Stevenson.
Hey, appreciate it, Angie.
So we appreciate all of it. Gibbs, right now, we have an episode out on True Crime All the Time.
Ooh, man, that's a very interesting one.
Yeah, it really is. We're talking about Ward Weaver. His crimes were horrific.
Yeah.
But, I think what really makes this episode extremely interesting is the number of family members that end up becoming murderers or were already murderers at the time that he started.
Yeah, the generational connection.
Yeah, it was like 3 generations of people that ended up becoming murderers. So it's just, there's a lot of things, I think, to this episode that people will find fascinating. But I'm ready. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Yeah, I just was trying to remember that song that you asked me about last week. Torn Between Lovers or something.
Torn Between Two Lovers, yeah.
Did you get your answers?
Yeah, I got my answer. I got 8,000 emails, 20,000 messages.
Oh, okay.
No, I got a lot of people. We actually even played a voicemail on True Crime All the Time.
Yeah.
I think what really threw me was that not the fact that you were right. That doesn't throw me. I did think for a minute you were making it up, but people confirmed you were right about the song. What really threw me was after, clicking on the link to go listen to it.
Right.
I thought, why in the world would Gibby think about this song? Number one, it's from like 1970 something.
Yeah.
Number two, it's horrible. I mean, it literally, to me, to my taste, is not a very good song.
You're not going to print those lyrics out and frame them up.
All respect to Mary McGregor, but the song is not, it's not a catchy tune. And the lyrics are all about, I'm in love with this guy, but I'm cheating on him with this other guy. Right. And
she's torn.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm ready. I'm really ready to get this going, man.
So we're talking about the unsolved mass murders of the Coulthurst family and the crew members of a boat called the Investor. This occurred on September 6th, 1982 in Craig, Alaska. And Craig's a very small fishing town on the island of Prince of Wales. It's actually closer to Vancouver than it is to Anchorage, Alaska.
Yes, it's very south part of Alaska, the Isles down there. Call them the Isles, I guess you would.
I don't know.
They're island, but yeah. I think a lot of people would go there coming out of the very northern part of Washington or out of Vancouver for sure.
In the town of Craig was the fishing boat named the Investor, owned by John and Sally Coulthurst of Bellingham, Washington. Both John and Sally came from a long line of commercial fishermen. So both of their families had been in this business for many, many years. John and Sally had recently purchased this very expensive state-of-the-art fishing boat. It was 58 feet in length. And the value, according to John Coulthurst, was $800,000.
It's a lot of money back in 1982.
I don't know what does that translate to today?
Yeah, it's like, 2.1.
Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, boop.
2.1.
I'll go with it. It's a lot of money. $800,000 is a boatload of money today.
It is.
It's a ton in 82.
It would have been.
So I mentioned it. The name of the fishing boat was the Investor. And it's an interesting name because a lot of times when you research this case, you see articles about this case, people will call the case the Investor.
Yeah.
They'll actually use the name of the fishing boat. We chose to use the name of the victims, the family. In the summer of 1982, John appointed his son, Mark, as the co-owner and skipper of the Investor. Mark and his wife, Irene, lived in Blaine, Washington. But after this, they had to make their way to Craig, Alaska, right? They've got to figure out how to make money on the fishing boat. Mark's wife, Irene, was pregnant with their third child. So they make this trip. Mark, Irene, they brought along with them their two children, 5-year-old Kimberly and 4-year-old John. Mark also hired 18-year-olds Chris Heyman and Jerome Keown, along with 19-year-olds Dave Moon and Mike Stewart. So these 4 individuals are going to be the crew for the Investor. Mike Stewart was Mark and Irene's nephew. So once everyone got assembled in Craig, Alaska, the Coulthurst family and the 4 crew members, they headed out to sea for the summer fishing season. And Gibbs, by all accounts, they were having a very successful season.
Yeah.
I mean, their trips were successful, catching salmon.
Yeah. That stuff that, I think you eat that, don't you?
Do I eat salmon?
Yeah.
Sure.
I thought you did.
Okay. You said that stuff like it's icky. I know you think it is because you don't like seafood.
I don't like it.
I forgot.
Yeah.
No, my family and I, we love salmon. The Investor returned to the port of Craig on Sunday, September 5th. Gibbs, I think everyone was happy.
Yeah.
Like I said, it had been a successful season. They had a sizable haul.
Yeah, this last bounty they brought to port was a good one for them. They were very happy.
When they were going to make a bunch of money.
Yeah, they were.
So once they offloaded the fish, the Investor was tied up to a similar sized fishing boat named the Decade on a dry storage dock. The Decade's owner, a man named Clyde Curry, He just happened to be the brother of Mark Coulthurst's business partner, John Curry Jr. Mark and John, along with another partner, owned Angel Island Pacific Salmon Cooperative.
Which was a good company to have because they could pool their resources together so they can get better prices for their fish, better prices on their bait to go out, just, everything in general. Better pricing.
When you have a cooperative,
sure,
right, that means you're bigger. You're able to leverage that size, that buying power.
Because of volume.
Yeah, it works out well normally. Late on the afternoon of September 5th, Mark gave the 4 crew members their orders. He told 2 of them to go into town to get fresh supplies, and he had the other 2 stay on the boat.
Yeah, he wanted 2 of them to get fresh supplies so they can get the ship back in shape before they store it for a longer period of time, because the fishing season at that time was over, but they needed to replenish all the dry goods they used and also clean up the place and get it, spick and span, as, maybe some captains would say. Get the spick and span. Or you say around here, when we're done eating, clean that kitchen up. Get it spick and span, Gibby.
I do.
I don't know.
It's kind of like the I buy you fly, except it's the I buy you clean. Now, at the same time, Mark and his family were preparing to head into town to celebrate his 28th birthday at a local restaurant. But not only that, right? They were going to celebrate his birthday, but it was also a celebration of this really good summer fishing haul. And they wouldn't be alone. There were going to be tons of other boat owners in town, having celebrations.
Yes.
It's a long season, man. It's a hard work, and you got to let some, blow some steam up.
Finally done. Everybody's got their big checks, got their share of whatever they pulled in, and you're going to probably have a few drinks, maybe a few more than you should.
Yeah, I think a lot of drinks were consumed that night at, the bars in town. On Monday, September 6th, around 6 a.m., the fishing boat Investor was seen drifting away from the Decade boat. The engine was on, but it wasn't in gear. It was just idling. A crew member of the Decade had seen someone in the wheelhouse. They also saw another person at the stern of the Investor, but could not identify who these people were.
No, he actually said he waved to the guy in the wheelhouse, and the guy in the wheelhouse kind of gave him like a half-ass wave, and that's it. But he couldn't make out who that was. Was that Mark? Was that somebody else he knew on that? No.
Another member of the crew. There's only 4 members of the crew.
Yeah.
My assumption is they kind of all knew each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That same crew member from the Decade later saw the Investor mooring lines left on their boat. They thought that was odd.
Well, yeah.
Because they should have been on the Investor.
I mean, you got a boat. You're not going to leave your tie-up ropes on the dock you go visit and not take them with you.
Yeah, I don't have a 58-foot commercial fishing, but I have a little runaround boat. But yeah,
but you're still going to take your ropes with you. You're not going to leave them somewhere else. You need those, and those big fishing boats. Those mooring lines are huge.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So I think, what are you going to do when you get somewhere else and you need to tie up?
Yeah.
Well, if you've left your lines, what are you supposed to do?
Exactly.
I mean, I think to a crew member of the Decade, that was just like, okay, that's just something everyone knows you don't do.
Right.
Nobody, a fisherman would never do that.
Exactly.
On September 7th, 1982, the Investor was seen by another fishing boat named the Casino.
What do you think about all these different names, by the way? Investor, Casino, Decade.
I think they're the Investor, the Casino, they're thinking about getting rich. We got to get these fish in the boat. That's how we're going to make our money.
Yeah.
And so let's name our boat something that denotes a sense of wealth.
Yeah. That's
going to be good luck. That's my take on it.
So do you have a name on your little boat?
No.
No. Okay. If you had to put a name on it,
I'd call it the Gibby.
I don't even want to know why.
So the skipper of the Casino radioed the Coast Guard and told them that the anchored boat Investor was engulfed in flames and smoke in a cove of Fish Egg Island. This is about a mile from the town of Craig. Once the Coast Guard got on site, they had 2 water pumps flown in and placed on a tugboat to try to get this fire under control. This boat's on fire.
Yeah. Flames shooting everywhere.
Once they got the fire out, the authorities approached the boat and they were able to board it. They were very quickly, Gibbs, able to determine that no one was alive on that boat. Authorities first found Mark and Irene Coulthurst, and their bodies were burnt so badly that they were essentially unrecognizable. I mean, they weren't even able to identify their identities until later in the day. Once they were able to get some dental records, they did determine that both Mark and Irene had been shot in the head. Authorities next discovered 5-year-old Kimberly Coulthurst, who was lying next to her cousin Mike Stewart. Both Kimberly and Mike had to be confirmed through dental records as well. They were burnt so badly that authorities weren't even able to determine if they had been shot.
Yeah, but I think the authorities assumed they had to be, but they couldn't prove it.
Well, I think it also tells you how badly they were burned.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about not having an intact skull.
Right.
Which would have shown, a
Exactly.
bullet wound. But I think it's not a horrible assumption to make. You have Mark and Irene who were shot. If you can't figure it out, it makes sense, at least to assume that was what most likely happened.
Yeah.
But then they had to stop the search because the fire started back up and they had to pull this recovery team that had boarded the boat back. It took firefighters all night to get this fire under control again.
It really did. And to the point that along with the firefighters and the Coast Guard, they had to also get the boat up to the shore of this cove because they were worried that this fire that reignited could actually sink the boat and they wouldn't be able to get a full recovery. So they also had to hurry up and find a way to get it pushed up to the shore while it was burning safely for the firefighters. But luckily they were able to do that.
The problem is by the time they did all this and they got the fire out, it's Wednesday, September 8th. They begin their search and recovery efforts again, but the boat is just a shell at this point. Everything above the deck was completely gone. So once they boarded the boat again, authorities found 2 more bodies. These were also unrecognizable. They were completely burnt up. They determined that these remains had to be either Jerome, Keown, Chris Heyman, or Dave Moon.
That's how unrecognizable they were.
But that's all they found.
Yeah.
So they made the assumption that the remaining crew member had to have been burnt up completely because of the intense heat of the fire once it reignited. And they thought that's what had to have happened to little 4-year-old John Coulthurst as well.
Yeah.
Because they didn't find any other remains.
No, they did not.
They also made the assumption that each had been shot in the head, but they couldn't confirm it because of the condition of the bodies. Well, and in 2 cases, they didn't have a body. So police began to look into the fire. And I don't think it was that hard, Gibbs, for them to determine that it was arson. The boat was equipped with systems, and it was built in a way that it shouldn't catch on fire, for one, let alone burn down, right? These systems would kick in, put the fire out.
Yeah.
Okay, that didn't happen.
And exactly the same thing, Mark's dad, John, said when we bought the boat. This was one of those boats that you really shouldn't have had to worry about it burning down ever.
No, for $800,000, I think you get some extra amenities, some extra controls, security measures.
Right.
The fire inspector also stated that the diesel fuel was in the back of the boat, yet the fire started in the front. So investigators knew they had 2 confirmed murders, right? There were 2 bodies that had execution style shots to the back of their heads. That was Mark and Irene. They also have arson. That could have likely killed the other victims. But again, I think the theory was always that they were most likely shot as well. And then the fire was set to burn the bodies.
To cover up the crime.
To cover up, the shootings. Police received some reports from some crew members from the casino who said they saw someone in a skiff who had a scar on his face. He was wearing a hat, appeared to be in his 20s, headed towards the beach. There were a few people on land that reported to police they saw this same individual when he docked.
Yeah. When he got out of the skiff and decided to head in town, they got to look at him.
And police did find the investor's skiff on the beach, which kind of backed up, this reporting. Police dove into this case. They were looking into it to figure out, okay, who would have wanted to kill any person on the boat enough to kill everyone?
Yeah.
And then cover it all up with a fire. Police, they received some leads. They looked into those as this was going on. A ceremony was held on Saturday, September 18th for all of the victims at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Bellingham, Washington. There were hundreds of people that showed up to mourn, to pay their respects to all of the families that day.
I imagine there was a lot of people there because I know that fishing community's pretty close.
After a few months of the locals investigating this crime, the Alaskan State Police traveled to Bellingham and Blaine, Washington to talk with friends, family, and past employees of John and Mark Coulthurst before they bought the investor. They had other boats, and police wanted to look at those logs. I think basically they wanted to see if they could find any ties from previous trips to this one or any other tie-ins, especially the last trips that Mark had taken.
That makes good sense. It really does. That's something that I think investigators would all try to do.
Right. Was there a trip where something happened and Mark got into it, or he did something that angered someone?
Right.
And that person waited and found the right time to exact their revenge. You got to look into all that. Police had a sketch developed of the person that witnesses had seen driving the skiff. They passed copies of that all around Craig, Alaska, but they also mailed it to everyone that held a current commercial fishing license and fished out of that port in Craig, Alaska. They were looking for a lead, Gibbs. I think they wanted to try to figure out if the person in this picture had been on anyone's boat recently.
Yeah. Now, the city of Blaine put up a $15,000 reward because that's the city that the Coulthurst family was out of. Mark and his wife and the kids.
So they put up $15,000 for any information leading to the arrest of the suspect. So police knew that for sure they had 6 dead, and most likely 7 because of little John. He was only 4 years old.
Right.
Most likely they had to have thought he perished. He would not have survived this. I think they were conflicted about, whether or not there was an 8th victim that would have been one of the crew members. Did they burn up completely in the fire, or could they have been the person on the skiff that took it to the beach? And I think this is huge, Gibbs, in this case, right? When you have bodies that completely burn up, essentially,
right?
And there's no teeth intact. There's no, how are you making a positive identification of who these bodies belong to?
And you just got fragments of their body laying there. It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah. So they had to have been thinking, right? Police, was it one of the crew members that could not be identified that took off on this skiff and maybe possibly had something to do with the deaths of, all the people on the boat? Maybe something happened out at sea on the trip that this person didn't like. Maybe he wasn't happy with his share of the cut.
Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he said, wait, why didn't I get a big cut like this guy or that guy? I did the same thing he did.
Yeah, and we don't know how they divvied up the money.
Right.
Maybe Mike got a little bit bigger cut because he was a relative. Who knows? And maybe this individual wasn't happy about that. Or maybe he decided, you know what? There's a bunch of people on this boat that just got a boatload of money.
Yeah. You're talking a couple $100,000 combined.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
Maybe this person said, you know what? I want all of it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to rob everyone. I'm going to kill everyone. And then I'm going to take off and get lost in the Alaskan wilderness, which is possible.
Sure.
Or maybe I'm just going to a different port and I'm going to jump on another boat and go out and blend in that way.
Right.
There's a lot of different scenarios. And I think it's part of what makes this case so mysterious. But I think Mark's dad, John, didn't subscribe to that theory. He definitely had his doubts because he told police that Mark only selected top guys for their boats. He paid them very well. Plus, this wasn't a brand new crew. I mean, this was a crew that Mark had used in previous fishing trips, and he asked for them specifically for this trip because of the new boat.
Yeah, and I think if you were a crew member, you'd be excited to be asked to go out on a new boat. You're like, man,
it's fancy.
Gonna break out in a new boat.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever watched some of those fishing shows on TV?
I have.
You are not living in the lap of luxury.
No. Neither one of us would probably do very well on a boat like that. One,
you don't like seafood.
I don't like seafood, and I get motion sickness way too easy.
That's 2 strikes against you.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like to work all that hard, so I'm out.
Yeah, and you don't like the ocean.
And I don't mind being on the ocean.
Yeah.
I don't like the beach. There's a difference. And I don't like to wade into the ocean.
Really?
I'll be on a boat on the ocean.
Yeah.
All day long. And I can stay on boats all the time.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me. But it looks like very hard work too. So I'm out.
Yeah. You're out. Well, let's be honest. And you also don't like to be told what to do.
That is true.
You would not want to answer to a skipper.
No, and I would be at the bottom of the totem pole, whatever they call one of those.
Oh, yeah. You'd be, what do they call them?
Swabby? Greenhorn?
Swabby or greenhorn, yeah.
But Gibbs, after police spoke to the eyewitnesses, obviously they would have had pictures of all the individuals that would have been on the Investor.
Right.
I think they figured out that whoever these people saw driving the skiff that day, it was not any of the crew members or any of the 8 people that were on the Investor. So police switched gears and began to think that all 8 of the people on the Investor were dead. The person in the skiff was a suspect in the arson and most likely the murders too. But I think investigators in this case, they had just a ton of issues to deal with. They had a hard time figuring out exactly what happened. They weren't even sure if Mark and Irene were killed on the boat.
No, because there's no way to really prove that.
Yeah, there's no crime scene. They know they were shot in the head.
Right.
They know they were burned, but were they killed in town somewhere and then taken back to the boat? And then that's when everybody else was killed and the boat was set on fire. There was just no way for them to put all of those pieces of the puzzle together.
And we've said it before. I mean, if you really want to destroy evidence, fire is a good way to do that if you allow it to burn all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases. I mean, I think there are, fire investigators that can piece some things together.
Right.
This was just such a hellacious fire.
Yeah.
That it pretty much burned up.
Destroyed everything.
Yeah.
And really, if you think about it, if the Coast Guard didn't push it up to shore and it burnt out into that cove, then there wouldn't be anything that they could possibly ever use, because once it burnt and then sunk, what are you going to recover? You know, it's just, it's all gone.
Now, I think if the fire had not reignited, maybe they would have found something.
Sure. And they might have, right? Because then they could tell if the other victims were actually shot, and they probably could have had confirmation of the 8th person. But unfortunately, that second fire did not help things.
So the case went cold. I mean, police were trying to figure out who this suspect was that had taken off in the skiff. They started to look into some of the crew members on Mark's previous boats, especially the ones over the last few years. And one of them stood out, and it was 23-year-old John Peel from Bellingham, Washington. At one point, John dated Mark's sister and was a crew member on one of his boats from 1980 to 1982. But in the summer of 1982, he took a spot on a different boat. And I think, Gibbs, the main reason that police began to look at him was that they believed he closely resembled the man that people had seen driving the skiff that day.
Yeah, he really did. He had that same look.
So they brought him in for questioning. And they learned that the reason he didn't work for Mark was that Mark had fired him on the previous trip because he allegedly had been drinking and using drugs on the boat.
Well, that would be a big no-no to do that on the boat.
When they questioned John about this, he said, no, that's not true. That's not what happened. Police asked John to take a polygraph. He did, and he failed it.
Which is never good.
It's never good. It's never going to help your case. Now, you and I have talked about polygraphs a lot. In 1982, authorities put much more weight behind a polygraph test than they would ever put today.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially a failed polygraph test. I mean, right. A lot of people looked at that as, oh, you're guilty. You're hiding something.
Yeah.
And this proves it.
Right out of the gate, it has to be you.
John's alibi was that he was asleep on the boat that he was working on during the time frame of the murders and the arson. It took police a while. They waited almost 3 years. In 1985, they moved forward and they arrested and charged John Peel with first-degree murder. Of the 8 victims, they also charged him with arson. Police said that John was not happy about being fired by Mark, and he retaliated. He got on board Mark's boat, shot Mark and his family and the crew with a .22 caliber pistol. Then he drifted the boat out, drove it to the cove where he anchored it. From there, he took the skiff into town, got gasoline, went back to the boat, set it on fire, and then took the skiff back to the beach and watched the boat burn.
Pretty good scenario.
It is. Doesn't mean it's true, but it's a pretty good scenario.
Yeah, I mean,
it does fit with what the eyewitnesses saw as far as, a person that did look like John coming back into the beach with the skiff.
So the police had an eyewitness that told them a man came into their store, bought a 2.5 gallon gas container, filled it up, and this man looked like the man in the composite sketch.
So that's huge, right? In addition to, other people saying John looked like the person that drove the skiff, now we have an eyewitness that's saying this guy came into my gas station, bought a gas container, bought gas. Oh, and by the way, he looks exactly like the sketch.
Yeah, it's kind of all aligning.
John Peel went on trial for the 8 murders and the arson in 1986. The trial went on for almost 6 months. I mean, there were some delays, so it wasn't a day in, day out 6 months. But during the trial, a skipper of another boat who knew John Peel said he saw him board the Investor on the night of the killings.
That's pretty telling.
That's not good when you've told police, hey, I wasn't on the boat.
Right.
I was on the boat I was working on and I was sleeping. You had the witness from the gas station tell the jury that he sold John Peel gasoline just hours before the fire. Not good either.
No.
The defense told the jury that, hey, there were over 500 fishermen in town during that time. A lot of those guys looked the same. Many of them dressed exactly the same. So how could any of these eyewitnesses be 100% certain that the person they saw was my client, John Peel?
Yeah. How do you make that determination?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my cousin Vinny.
100%.
Right? When he's got those people on the stand,
Right.
You know, he's got the lady with the thick glasses. Right. It's kind of one of those things. The defense is just trying to chip away at the identification that these witnesses are making, because really, what else does the police have?
You're right. And
there's no physical evidence.
And if that was him, he'd be saying, "Are you sure? Are you telling me?" I could just hear him do it.
Did you make grits during the time that you sold my client the gasoline? And how do you make your grits?
Yeah, well, there's 2-minute grits. I'll have to watch that again. That was a great movie.
I actually just watched it like a week or two ago.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's one of those, if it comes on, I'll just finish it out.
Yeah, he's great in that.
And she's great. I love her as well.
Yeah.
And Gibbs, the trial went on for a long time, but how much did each side really have?
When all you have is circumstantial evidence, what else are you going to do?
Well, in more specifically, mostly eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
Right. That are saying, I saw this guy. You have the defense chipping away at those identifications. So the jury got the case. They deliberated for 6 days. It seemed like a very long time.
Yeah, it is a long time.
They just couldn't agree on a verdict on the 8 counts of murder and arson. So it turned into a hung jury. And of course, right, anytime that happens, the victim's relatives are not happy with that outcome.
No, they were pretty upset.
Well, they were only going to be happy with one outcome, and that's somebody being convicted for the murder of their loved ones. The 2 outcomes they're not going to be happy with is an acquittal or a hung jury. At least with a hung jury, you have the possibility of a retrial.
Right.
With an acquittal, you're done.
You're done. Yeah.
That's it. A relative of the Coulthursts said, quote, somebody ought to pay. I don't say it should have been Peel, but it should have been somebody. Dean Moon's mother said, quote, I thought after being up there for a couple of weeks watching the trial that they would find him guilty, as they should have. So kind of have a couple of contrasting type of statements.
Yeah.
Right? You have one family member saying, somebody's got to pay.
Yeah.
I don't know if John Peel killed all these people or not, but I need somebody to pay for these murders.
Yeah.
I think Dean Moon's mother obviously had a different sense of it.
Very direct.
Yeah. She was very adamant that after, seeing what went on in the trial, she felt very strongly that John Peel was guilty, and she felt like the jury should have been able to convict him.
Yeah.
But John Peel's not done, right? They're not going to just let him walk away. His second trial started in January 1988. Now, there were some locals, quite a few, that really couldn't understand why the prosecution was retrying John Peel. They really just didn't have very much evidence that proved John had anything to do with these murders or the arson or, anything.
And at this point, the state had spent $2 million.
But the case moved forward. A jury listened to testimony for about 3 months. Then they got the case. They deliberated for 4 days before finding John Peel not guilty on all 8 counts of murder as well as the arson. In 1990, John Peel filed a wrongful prosecution suit for $177 million.
It's an odd number.
It's an odd number. It's also a very high number. Now, it took him 7 years in court but eventually the state settled with him for a reported $900,000 for his time and legal fees during the 2 trials. That's a far cry from $177 million.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of money, but really, if you think about it, I don't think it is that much.
Well, which one are you talking about? The 900 or the 177?
Yeah, well, 177 is a lot, but the 900 doesn't seem like it's nearly enough
No.
for what you've been through.
If you go back and you look at this timeline,
Yeah.
John Peel was arrested in 1985. His first trial didn't start until a year later.
Right.
His second trial didn't start until 1988. Now, I don't know if he was out during, parts of this or the entire time, but either way, if you are suspected of killing 8 people, that's no fun time.
No.
And you're facing the possibility of the death penalty or at the very least life in prison.
Sure. And what was interesting during the trials with him, he would wear like one of those full face masks that you would wear during a blizzard.
Like a ski mask?
Ski mask during the trial. Yeah. To cover his face.
Because he didn't want it to be put out on the media?
I'm guessing that's why. Yeah. I didn't really see anything around why he did that. But
yeah, it's strange because you would think it's not that hard for the media to dig up pictures of him that they could splash all over.
And there are pictures of him all over. Yeah. But I just thought it was interesting at that time that that's what he chose to do.
Well, maybe he had plans to rob something in between. No.
Maybe he was worried about the COVID.
It's one of those things. I have no idea if John Peel had anything to do with this case or not.
Right.
What I will say is if he did and he got off, okay, that's horrible. But if he didn't and, they put him through all of this for nothing, that's horrible too.
Sure.
And, I really go back to the eyewitnesses. I don't know how many they had that said John Peel was the guy.
Right.
But we know. And you can look at a bunch of documentaries. You can look at a bunch of cases where we know there was a wrongful conviction. A lot of times the eyewitness testimony plays a key factor in that.
It does.
Because, and I may have talked about this before, I was reading something that said, a lot of people think that your eyes work like a video recorder, that whatever your eyes see gets imprinted in your brain.
Right.
It's not the case.
No.
It works nothing like a video recorder.
I wish it did for me.
Right. Because, you and I could see the same thing and recount it totally different.
Which we do.
Which we do, quite a bit. But a person can, see something and then they may not be talked to for however long, by the police. Are they 100% sure? Number one, you're looking at a sketch too.
Right.
So does it match the sketch? I don't know. How good is the sketch? Was the sketch drawn from a picture of John Peel, as we've seen in some wrongful convictions? I'm not saying that either way. I don't know what happened in this case. I just know for a fact that there have been a ton of wrongful convictions based on eyewitness verification. And it's not like these people are doing it maliciously. They believe that they saw this person. But did they really? No, it turns out they couldn't have. It wasn't the person.
Right.
But they'll swear up and down that was the person because that's what their mind remembers. Or that's what somebody planted in their mind in some cases. I think one of the very interesting things about this case, Gibbs, is that state and local police, they are no longer looking for the killer, the person that committed this mass murder on the investor, because they believe the case is closed and that they got the right guy. They just think that the jury got it wrong. Authorities have stated in the press, quote, just because someone is acquitted doesn't mean they're innocent. It just means there wasn't enough evidence to show guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that's a true statement. That's a very true statement.
Happens all the time.
John Peel absolutely could have had something to do with this. It's possible they just didn't have the evidence to prove that he did.
Right.
Another state detective said he spent so much time on this case, he's 100% sure he had the right guy. He wasn't going to waste any more of his life on this case. It was time for him to move on.
Yeah, it's a pretty direct statement.
Yeah, he was. I mean, a lot of the people that worked this case were 100% certain that they got the right guy. So to them, there was no reason to keep going on looking for the killer because they already know who it was.
Yeah, this is the guy to them. This is the guy that did it. What, case solved.
John Peel made a statement. He said, "It's terrible being an innocent man accused of a crime. I just thank God it's over. Justice did work this time. Somebody was responsible for this. Somebody out there knows what happened." Well, that's definitely true.
Sure.
Whether it is John or somebody else, there's somebody that knows what happened.
Yeah, somebody bought that gas can. Somebody did that.
So you bring up the gas can, and this was something I was going to point out earlier, and I forgot. Just because somebody comes in and buys gas at a certain time doesn't mean they use that gas to then set that boat on fire.
No.
I mean, to me, I think that's where the evidence really sometimes breaks down very quickly.
Right.
Okay, you're saying this is the guy that came in and bought the gas. Well, where's the proof that he then went to this boat and
use that gas on that boat?
I can very easily see, not even knowing all the evidence, how a jury could look at some of the things that we do know and say, man, there's some holes here.
Yeah.
You're not connecting all the dots for me. And so just based on that, I have some reasonable doubt.
Yeah. If you're asking me to put this guy away for life or to death, whatever the case is,
I'm going to need more than
I need a little bit more than the fact that somebody came into that store and bought a gasoline can and filled it up with gas, and that somebody thought they saw somebody that looked like him on this skiff. Because that's all you're telling me at this point.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm not hearing anything else.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of cases are solved and they get convictions based on circumstantial evidence. That happens all the time. It just seems to me, based on the research, that this is the thinnest of the thin when it comes to evidence. You basically have, people saying they saw this guy here, here, and here. Nobody saw him kill anybody.
No.
Nobody saw him, light the boat on fire.
Yeah, they don't have the 22 to prove that's the murder weapon and that was his gun.
There's no firearms expert testifying, okay, he bought this gun, as far as I know. Now, again, we don't know everything that came out at trial, but
I also assume if he did take any money, that they should have been able to do some forensic accounting somehow to figure that out, even back in 82.
But again, Gibbs, to me, that's what makes these types of cases so interesting.
Yeah.
This is a real mystery, and one that most likely will never be solved because, you know what? They're not trying to solve it anymore. No. They feel like they've already solved it. So I think from a victim's family standpoint, that's rough to know that, okay, they tried this guy twice. Second time he was acquitted, but you're not going to keep working the case?
Well, they can't go after him anymore.
No, they definitely can't go after him.
So if they sit down with the family and said, here's everything we have.
Yeah.
Here's what we took to court. Here's what we couldn't take into court.
And maybe there's just a lot more that they've not been able to disclose. Right. So we don't know what it all is.
Exactly.
And maybe the jury, like you said, the jury doesn't always get to hear all of the evidence.
Right.
Because there are things that are not allowed to be introduced at trial.
Sure.
So we don't know. But again, I think for me, that's why I find some of these cases like this very fascinating.
Right.
Now you go back to the victims, and this is a big tragedy. This is a lot of people. 8 people lost their lives.
Sure. 2
of these were young.
Yeah.
I mean, John was only 4 years old.
4 and 5. Kimberly, 5. Yeah.
But you also look at the people. I mean, by all accounts, these were good people. These weren't folks that were into doing bad things. They didn't put themselves in a position. They weren't running drugs for a cartel, on this boat, as far as I know.
Right.
To put themselves in harm's way. It's just a tragedy all the way around. And if John didn't have anything to do with it, that's a tragedy too.
Yeah.
That he had to go through what he went through.
I agree.
But that's it. That's it for the unsolved mass murder of the Coulthurst family and the crew of the Investor. Gibbs, we've got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name is Vanessa Walker, and I'm calling from New Salem, Massachusetts. I am just calling to say that I think that your podcasts are great. I've been listening to them for over a year now, and I appreciate them. I also wanted to say that I think you both are hilarious, and I do not believe that Gibby would be half as funny if Mike wasn't there to point out all of his mistakes. Anyway, thank you, and keep your own time ticking.
You couldn't be more true than what you just said right there.
I know. I think this is one of the most insightful voicemails that we've ever received.
It really is.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Ben from Amherst County, Virginia. I found your podcast a few months ago, and now it's practically the only one I listen to. I just have 3 things I wanted to say. First, I got all caught up on TCAT and decided to switch over to Unsolved, and let me tell you, the theme song is banging. Second, Mike, you remind me of an old buddy I had in college. He was the consul of our fraternity and a good friend of mine. It's not just your voice, but the things you say too. And lastly, Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento, that guy was insane. I get it. He did some terrible things, but he has the one case where I am actually convinced that that guy was crazy. He even spent part of his life in a mental asylum, and they let him go because he was, quote, cured. I'm normally all for the death penalty, but in his case, I gotta say the judicial system failed. But that's a 30-some-year-old case, and I like to hope we've made some leaps and bounds in cases of mental health. Anyways, keep doing what y'all are doing, and keep your own, stay safe, and keep your own time ticking.
All right, Ben, thank you very much for the voicemail. I wasn't sure which one to put this on, Gibbs. He talked about Unsolved, but then he talked about Richard Chase, which was a TCAT episode, one of the strangest ones we've done.
Very strange, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with him, at the end there. I think we have made, as a society, a lot of progress.
Oh, leaps and bounds.
In the area of mental health, especially when it comes to criminals.
Yeah, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should always be continually striving to fine-tune things.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
All right.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. It's Teresa from Texas. Just wanted to call and say how much we appreciate you keeping us entertained during this mess. We're working in the hospital laboratory, and so they're keeping us hopping, but we still get to listen. Just listen to your podcast on Ken Rex McElroy, and interestingly enough, my husband grew up there in Nottoway County. Yeah, like it's Nottoway. And in the next town, my husband's mother had a one knew Ken Rex. He was a monster. They called him, he was just a pedophile. He was horrible and terrorized everybody night and day. And after he shot Mr. Bowenkamp, they just had enough. They had enough. And his mother told us when she told me the story that day, no one was ever going to talk, and they never did. And it's amazing to me. Vigilante justice isn't really that cool, but they weren't getting help from anywhere else. And they just were backed in the corner, and they did what they did. But anyway, great podcast. Appreciate all you guys do. Keep coming, keeping me entertained, and keep on time ticking. Bye.
Hey, stay safe in that hospital laboratory there.
Yeah, no doubt. But good work that she's doing.
Yeah.
So, that episode last week, Gibbs, it really was a very fascinating case.
Yeah. When
you think about the fact that, okay, all these people got together and said, we're going to do this and we're never going to speak about it.
That's
and
right.
Nobody, not a single person has come out on their deathbed and spilled the beans.
That's a rarity.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, really.
Hi, boys. This is Elizabeth Kanaka. I left a voicemail months ago. I must have missed it or it wasn't played. I just wanted to say how much I love you guys, and thank you so much for keep putting out these cases during this time. I'm a hairstylist, so it's kind of tough for all of us non-essential workers. I think in my last voicemail, I said if you guys ever make it out to Chicago, I'd love to cut your hair. It's wild right now because if we can't do anything because if we got caught, we could face jail time, and even I think it's a $10,000 fine. Anyways, or else I'd fly out to you guys and cut your hair. Thanks, Gibby, for trying to pronounce my last name. It's Ganaka. I thought it was really funny. Yeah, so it's always great listening to you guys. Thanks for all you do. Keep your own time ticking. Bye.
I really need a haircut.
You really do. Gibby will pay for your flight. No, we were just talking about it earlier. My wife and girls are really hoping that their hairstylist is able to open up.
Yeah.
And I think we're on the verge of, here in Ohio, of being able to open up.
I think so.
But there's going to be some very interesting caveats. Like they said, they won't be able to style and blow dry your hair for whatever reason. Like, I don't know if the blow dryer would spread something, but they're really putting a lot of, and obviously only one person in there at a time or whatever. And so it'll be interesting to see. We keep talking about it. What is the new normal going to be, and how long is that going to be in place?
I just need somebody to take the clippers to the sides and back.
I said
and
I would
to
do
the top.
it. You won't let me do it.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about what you would do.
We'll put it on Patreon. People will love it.
Sure.
Video it. All right, everyone. We appreciate you listening. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.